This is Film Talk, where we interview the brightest minds in filmmaking 5 days a week. Do you need a great camera for your next shoot? You may want to consider the world's lightest handheld Super 35 digital film camera, Blackmagic's Ursa Mini 4.6K. The Ursa Mini boasts a 4.6K sensor, global shutter, and up to 15 stops of dynamic range. It's perfectly balanced for handheld use and comfortable enough to be used all day long. Scene one, take one. Film Talk Nation, we are greenlit for yet another great show. Vanessa Frank here, and I'm excited to bring you our featured guest today, Richard Botto. Richard, are you ready for your close-up? Richard Botto is a screenwriter, producer, actor, and filmmaker, and the creator and CEO of social network Stage 32. Since the launch of Stage 32 in September 2011, this filmmaking community has grown to more than 500,000 members from all across the globe. Forbes has described Stage 32 as Linda for film, television, and theater creatives. Richard, it's an honor to have you on the show today.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you, Vanessa.
So I honestly, Richard, I almost don't know where to start in that you have had such an interesting trajectory that half of me is going, I just really first want to hear about how you first got into the industry. And the other half is like, I just want to hear this incredible story about how Stage 32 came to being. Maybe we should just start chronologically. So if you could maybe just start by sharing with us, like, how did you first get into the industry? How did you first get the filmmaking bug?
The filmmaking bug was with me since I was a kid. I loved movies. My family didn't know where the hell this came from, but I wasn't just loving film. It was loving everything about the process. I wanted to know everything about the filmmaker's relationship with the director's relationship with the screenwriter, the director's relationship with the actors, how the producer worked with the director. The business side of it, the craft side of it, all of it interested me at a very early age. And really, my desire was to become a director. And somehow or another, I kind of got sidetracked into acting, which took over in college. And that's kind of how I got into the industry, although it was more in theater at that time back in New York. And then I took a little hiatus. I was running a magazine called Razor. It was a national men's lifestyle magazine that I started in the early 2000s. And that kind of played in the arena of GQ and Esquire.
Yeah.
Those types of things, and during those types of titles, I should say. And during that time, made a ton of contacts in the industry, worked with just a million, actors and filmmakers and screenwriters, and then of course the publicists, managers, and agents that go along with them. And so when I got done with Razor and we ceased publishing, I got into producing a little bit and back into writing and back into a little bit of acting. And I had a bunch of contacts to kind of lean on that I had made during the Razor years, even though they only knew me as a publisher and an editor. So it was, I had to do some work again to prove to them that I knew a little bit about the business as well. But that's kind of a Cliff Notes version of how it all started and how I got into it.
Well, it's interesting that I know that for a lot of people, kind of the shift to online content really hit hard that magazine publishing business, and I would imagine that you were super fortunate to kind of have a passion to fall back on, so to speak, during that whole transition.
Yeah, I mean, it's fun. It's kind of funny how it all worked out because we were way ahead of the curve as far as online content was concerned. A lot of things that magazines or magazine titles or that's only being embraced now by certain magazines, which includes extra content for subscribers and added sort of added bonus material for people who for readers. We were doing that way back, but there wasn't a market for it at the time, and there wasn't advertising support, I should say, for it at the time. So it was very fortunate that I was able to immediately fall back onto a producing project right after. It was a movie that actually didn't end up going. It was a movie that we had Julianne Moore and Richard Gere attached to. But it was a year-long, it was a really interesting time. And it was a year-long process with this film that allowed me, because we were in this circle of people. There were so many people involved with this project that had other things going on, that when this thing fell apart, I had no shortage of projects to kind of choose from on the producing side and even a little bit on the writing side at the time. to be involved with. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was a good place to be, and it was really falls into everything that we'll probably end up talking about, which was spending a lot of time during that period making contacts and networking that
Yes.
really benefited me. Yeah.
Yes. Well, in that perspective, I know that you're kind of the master of networking in this
Yeah.
industry, or at least you are the grandfather of all of that on stage 32.
Hey, hey,
Um,
don't age me.
hey, there's some, it's not that bad of a thing to be, but yeah, you have built this incredible community of literally hundreds of thousands of filmmakers across the globe that are connecting daily, and getting connected into great education and great contact with one another, and having a daily dialogue about how they can get better at their craft. So, how did that come around?
There were a lot of, you know, uh, sort of a lot of entry points into that question. And, it was a combination of a bunch of things. It took me about 2 years from concept to launching phase one. And part of that was because I knew it was going to be a gigantic undertaking. And I wanted to make sure that I was willing to do that and willing to take it on and not have it, or not have it impact my creative side
Mm.
too much. I knew it would take a little bit of time away from it, but I also thought it was very necessary and very vital. And some of those entry points were things that go back as far as when I was an actor in New York and seeing people that I was very very good friends with, and people who or colleagues that were enormously talented leave the game because they just didn't have the contacts to
Right.
cast a wide enough
Yes.
net, to get
Yeah.
success, to be success, and they had to pay the bills, or they had a family or kids or whatever, and they
Mm.
they have to take care of them and be responsible. And, that's something that always stayed with me. But there was, a couple of key moments. One was working on a Sundance film called Another Happy Day that I was a producer on back in 2010, which went to Sundance in 2011. And, it was filmed in Michigan. Michigan was very, very big on the tax incentives at the time, so there's a lot of filming going
Mm.
on there. And we were working with a local Michigan crew. And, I like to tell the story that it's like, you work on a film like that, it's like summer camp, and everybody swears they're going to stay together and they're going to,
Yes.
help each other out. And
Yeah.
then you go separate ways. You don't hear from anybody
It's the
until,
worst.
yeah, but until what happened was all the tax incentives dried up in Michigan, and all of a sudden
Oh
all the people in Michigan
man.
wanted to move to LA. And they're
Yeah.
like, who do you know? And I'm
Yeah.
like, it really doesn't matter who I know, because, most people out here, there's a family kind of aspect to it. People, you have to
Yes.
work your way in. So there
Mm.
was that idea of how do people network from afar, or how do people network in their own communities. And I guess the third part of it, or if there's a third entry point for purposes of this conversation, it was the fact that I was on social media and wasn't getting anything out of it on the broad-based social media side. I was on
Really.
Facebook, LinkedIn. It just wasn't doing anything for me.
Mm.
And it was ending up being a time suck because it was too much family and friends.
Yes.
And I just felt that the time was right, and that niche social networks was where this was going to go. This whole entire idea of social media and networking was going to go. And I finally convinced myself that all these signposts, I guess, were
Mm.
pointing to the fact that the time was right. And I finally decided in 2011 to give it a run.
Wow. And I read earlier this crazy statistic of like, am I right in thinking in the first 3 months you had like 50,000 members? Is that correct?
It was like 5,000.
Oh,
When we were in
5,000.
beta, yeah, when we were in beta, I went to 100 of my industry friends, and the whole idea was to crowdsource this thing before the word crowdsourcing was really
Yes.
popular. But the idea was, I want this to be a community, so I want this to be word of mouth. I'm not going to go out there and advertise the hell out of it and
Mm.
carpet bomb the hillside with, trying to, push people into this. I want to see if there's going to be organic growth right off the bat. So I went to 100
Yeah.
of my industry friends and basically said, if you like it, invite at least 5 fellow creatives. That is a mission and a strategy that has remained in place today. If you join the
That's
site, you
so
get an email, a
smart.
letter from me saying,
I
"Hey,
got it.
if you,
I signed up this morning. And it was,
oh, so you saw it,
I
yeah,
have to say, for those of our listeners who are not yet members of Stage 32, it is incredibly simple. If you have a Facebook account with a simple button, push of the button, you can join Stage 32. And it was just really intuitive. And am I right in thinking it's membership is free, right?
Oh, it's completely free. Yep.
Yeah, so I was amazed kind of, I'd somehow assumed, oh, that there must be some kind of a monthly fee or something of the sort. And then becoming a member, just getting to see the plethora of really high quality content on this site merged with the ability to be able to connect with people in real time. It's like, wow, this is like a tool that I've needed for years.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
I'm glad you found it to be so simple. I mean, we want it to be, we've intended it to be, and we programmed it to be, something that is incredibly easy to join, but then is
Mhm.
fully immersive from the second that you get in there. So I'm thrilled to hear that we hit the mark.
Absolutely. So, what is your vision for Stage 32? Is it very much to just see that grow, continuing to grow, or do you kind of see an evolution coming up for it?
Oh, I think there's definitely an evolution. I mean, we didn't start out. One of my goals with the platform from the beginning was to have top level educators. I thought the education that was online when uh, before I launched in beta, I thought the education online, some of it was just horrible. You have a lot of snake oil salesmen out there, people that are
Yes.
not qualified to teach. We spent a ton of time, cultivating relationships in this industry with
Mm.
people who have climbed to the top of the mountain, who have been there and done that, to come
Yes.
in and teach for us. We now work with over 500 industry executives worldwide to
Mm.
help us with our education, and that's something we're enormously proud of. So that's been an evolution in and about itself, is to be able to provide top level education at the most affordable price out there. We are 30 to 50% less expensive as far as our webinars and classes are concerned than anybody out there,
Yeah.
and I would say our educators are 1,000 times more accomplished. So we're
Yeah.
very proud of that. But I also think there's a lot of ideas in the pipeline as far as where this platform can go. We think it's
Mm.
an extremely, and I could speak from my creative side on this, it's an extremely exciting time in the industry right now, especially in the independent film world and in the television world and just in the content creation world. More content being consumed than ever, more content being purchased than ever, more organizations, networks, on the hunt for original content, more managers and agents on the prowl for new talent and original
Mm.
voices. And, we're at the forefront of a lot of that. And so I see a natural evolution with where the industry is going and how we could affect change on it, as I feel like we've affected change in some other areas over the last 4 years.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I'm just excited to watch this evolution and see what comes from it. I know that you already have some incredible testimonials of what this platform has enabled some filmmakers to do, and I'm sure that that's just the beginning. Well, Richard, I would love to ask you a question that's very personally intriguing to myself as someone who struggles to balance my own schedule between filmmaking and the show and various other things I do. You are the CEO of this huge social network with 500,000 members and growing daily. And from what I understand, you still have you're active as a filmmaker as well. How on earth do you balance this? How do you manage that?
Well, it's a great question. It's one I get asked all the time, and it's one
Yeah.
why when people make excuses to me, sometimes I say, wait a second.
Yeah.
Look, I think that I'm working on a project right now that I'm a writer on, and it's something that has strict deadlines, and it's something that is in a constant state of flux. Things,
Mm.
pages are getting changed, people have opinions, notes are coming in.
Yeah. Oh, I know
The
that.
reality is, yeah, the reality of the situation is it's got to get done, right? So I
Yeah.
make sure that I'm being honest about my day. And this is one of the reasons,
Mm.
for example, why I got off of Facebook, for example, early on, was that I was like, oh man, I'm putting in all this time networking. No, I really wasn't. I was putting in a lot of time, with family and friends and
Looking
doing,
at baby photos.
yeah, looking at baby photos and what people have for lunch. And, that's
Yes.
not getting me anywhere. So,
No.
so I had to be honest with myself about my time and honest about what my schedule was every day. And,
Yeah.
I'll take it one step further. You asked, how do you balance the work with with the creative, but I'll take it one step further and say that networking to me is a job. Now, the
Mm.
second I started treating my screenwriting and my acting and my filmmaking or whatever project I was working on, as soon as I started treating that, even before I had a manager or before I was getting jobs or whatever, I said, look, it is a job. Even if I'm an
Yes.
amateur, or even if I'm just starting out, this is a job. And the second I
Mm.
started treating it like a job, well, then there was a responsibility there. And that meant if I had to get up the half hour earlier or stay up the half hour later or find that time, whenever it was during the day, to put in the time, you found it. It's the same thing
Mm.
with networking with me. I find at least a half hour, an hour of the day each day to network on Stage 32 because it's vitally important. And I can honestly say that my last two film projects, my last two screenwriting projects, and landing my screenwriting manager, they all came through connections on Stage 32.
Wow.
And had I not put in the time, it's the truth. I mean, and had I not
Yeah,
put in the time,
it wouldn't
that
have
wouldn't happen.
happened. Well,
So
so
to me,
sorry.
yeah, no, no, again,
I was going to ask, as someone who is so proficient in the area of networking and who really has been a conduit for many, many other people to get stuck into that aspect of their career, what advice can you give on great networking within the film industry? Because I think for a lot of us, just the mention of the word networking conjures up some really horrible images. And we've all seen those people within the industry that we don't want to be like, who are just
mhm.
really just leave you feeling like you need a shower after you've met them. So, how do you avoid being that guy? And how do you become the guy that people go, oh, wow, I actually feel like I want to stay in touch with this person?
Yeah, that is an awesome question, and the truth of the matter is that you have to be selfless, and
Mm,
you have to make it about the other person first. You
yes.
have to, there's so many people in this industry that are look at me, look at me, look at me, and I've seen so many people crash
Yes.
and burn
Oh, gosh,
in
yes.
networking situations where the result probably would have been different for them, and they would have probably gotten the desired result that they wanted had they only changed their approach.
Mm,
you know, Everybody has a project. Everybody has a goal. Everybody has something they're looking to accomplish, including the person that you're walking up to that you want to network with. So
yes.
make it about them. Ask a few questions. I always say, ask three questions before you even say anything about yourself.
Yes, yes.
You know,
That's so
that's an
smart.
approach because you know what you'll end up finding out. What people forget is I don't care how accomplished the person is, they want to feel like that you give a shit about them, that you
Yes,
care at least a little bit about
absolutely.
them, and that
Absolutely.
that you're not just looking at them as a target. That you're looking at them as maybe a possible potential collaborator. And isn't that
Mm,
what this business is all about? It's about collaboration. So
mm,
networking to me is about collaboration as well. If you're able to present yourself in a way that makes the other person not be on the defensive, because that's natural instinct when you're networking and you're out
mm.
at an event and you're at the target, you're making that person feel more like somebody that you want to have a conversation with and that you
Yeah.
have something, you have something original to say to them or to ask them. Hey, listen, if it's somebody that you know, or if it's somebody you've been targeting all along, you should know enough about that person to be able to go in and ask them a question about
Right.
themselves or
Absolutely.
compliment them in some way, and not in a creepy way, but compliment them in some way about, something that they've done. Ask them why.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's
Absolutely.
that's the right
I'm
approach.
always amazed how just taking 5 minutes to ask someone about their family and their interests outside of work can so utterly, in my experience, has so utterly sped up the process of,
Hmm.
and it's something that I think, particularly in a town like LA where people are um, so obsessed with work. It's like a breath of fresh air when someone, asks you about your kids and, if you're homeschooling them and just having an involved conversation about their 2-year-old. I have just found that to be like just the most amazing thing that one can do. It's interesting. I was having a conversation yesterday with actually on the show with the writer and director of The Young Messiah, which is coming out very shortly in cinemas, and it's this beautiful adaptation of an Anne Rice novel. And that filmmaker was saying to me that he has really found that it really helps him in terms of networking to meet people like through his work. So he was sharing how that whole The Young Messiah project came about because Anne Rice saw one of his movies and she actually wrote like an article on it. And that's how that whole thing came about. And he said, if you meet people who are already fans of your work, that can really help as well because then it's not just you trying to make the noise and building the buzz, but you're dealing with people who already, it's kind of like your work has sold you to them, which I thought was kind of an interesting approach.
Well, I think it brings up another interesting point. I mean, I think there's two things at play here, and everything you just said. One is that gaining champions of who you are, and I'm not just talking about your work, but your
Mm.
character. What you're
Yes.
about, what you stand for, and everything like that. There is nothing more effective than that. But you have to
Mm.
start somewhere, right? You have to start somewhere by getting to meet people, and in this particular instance, this was a sort of a word of mouth, who knows who kind of thing, which is great. But
Yeah.
you got to start somewhere too, right? So your example of, talking about the kids or, something having to do with the family is extremely well taken. But if you're
Yeah.
coming in completely cold, see, here's the thing. There is still something to learn about everybody. Let's say you don't know about their family. You don't know. Maybe
Yes.
it's like I said earlier, maybe it's a little creepy if you like the first contact you're having. There is still
You don't want your
um
first line to be, "Hey, are you married?"
yeah, well, yeah, I mean, look at my stuff, hey, I have this, I have that. You don't want that. The great thing is that, and this is the same thing on social media. I mean, it really is. I mean, the
Mm,
beauty of social media today is you can reach anybody, anywhere, from anytime in the world, no
I
matter, I mean,
know.
any time of day, anywhere in the world. But your approach still means everything. So if you're going in from a standpoint of, even if it's, what are you working on now? What interests
Yes.
you now? What, anything. It could be anything. Any
Mm.
sort of question. I always say that the two on social media in general, this isn't face to face, but the two great neutralizers and the two great um, sort of entryways into social media is to ask questions and to share content.
Yes.
And if you do that kind of thing, and I would say that the number three, you got to do it in the right way. Is to compliment. Is to say that
Yes. Absolutely.
great
To
job,
edify.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, be grateful, be complimentary, but ask questions, and you'll
Mm.
never go wrong entering a conversation or a networking situation by asking a genuine question. You will win more battles than you will
Yeah.
lose, and get brought into where you want to be in that conversation more quickly by asking questions than by coming in with some sort of statement about
Oh,
yourself.
I completely agree. I'm just curious, Richard, do you still get just a little bit nervous before going into those networking situations? Or are you just like the master and it just doesn't even affect you anymore?
No, no, no. It's never. Listen, it's really never come easy for me, especially in a
Really?
public networking situation. I have never been one to walk up to somebody.
Mm.
I'm still not really, and it's interesting now. I'm on the other side of it a lot. It stays very to me or everything where everybody wants to come talk
Yes.
to me, but so I get to see firsthand, the best and worst practices, and
Mm.
know that that's definitely affected me as well. To sit there and say, well, this is not the way I would want to be approached. If I am in a situation where I'm the one doing the approaching, it's made it easier from the standpoint that I know I can go in and not have to talk about myself. I can go in and talk
Yes.
about the other person,
I know,
and I
right?
do always try to come in from a place of genuine interest. And that's the word genuine is very important as well. You
I
want to come in
agree.
from a place of genuine interest.
I could not agree more thoroughly with every word of what you're saying, and I just wish that there were more people in this industry who got that, because I think it would make for a more dynamic and fun place to work at times.
Yeah, I
um,
agree. But here's the thing too, though. You can't get discouraged by that because I always say to people, look, it's like the you talk to screenwriters all the time, and they're like, oh my God, 50,000 scripts get registered at the WGA every year.
yeah.
They're like, how do I stand out? And I'm like, okay, well, here's how you stand out. Okay, first of all, I can guarantee about 50% of those scripts are not formatted correctly. So guess what? Now
Yes.
you're down to 25,000 scripts. I could bet you that 50,000 of them, I mean, another half of them don't have, a great opening or great insight.
Yeah.
And I can go down this list to the point where you go, okay, now you're down to maybe 1 in 1,000. Did you improve your
Yeah.
odds? Well, it's the same thing with networking. Okay, you are going to
Mm.
give yourself such a competitive advantage if you handle yourself in the right manner. So
Yeah.
you can't worry about everybody else. I know it sucks to be on the receiving end of that networking, and I hate it as much as everybody. But as far as what you can control and and the competitive advantage you can give yourself by handling yourself correct in a manner correctly in a manner that makes people want to take an interest in you, you are by virtue of that, scraping away the competition, stripping
Yes.
away the competition, getting people wanting to be more involved in what you are and what you're about.
Mm.
Then, of course, if you're taking care of your craft on the other end, which, if you're doing your work and honing your craft, guess what? You got both ends covered. Now you're
Yeah.
going to get, you're getting the people that are interested in you, and you have the material ready, or your craft home. Those things are
Mm.
the things that win the day and give you the competitive advantage more
Yeah.
often than not. So you can't always worry about what everybody else is doing and how everybody else doesn't get it, because you drive yourself nuts, especially in this business. But if you control what you can control, you'll do all right.
Yeah, it's interesting. What you're saying reminds me very much of a brilliant little book by Seth Godin, which I actually quote a lot these days because I just think it's so applicable to our line of work. It's called The Dip, and really his thesis is that for all of us, if you're looking to become highly successful in any field, be it being a world-class pianist or a ballerina or a scientist, there's going to be a certain amount of competition, and you kind of go through this process of being in a dip, in a lull, a trial in your career you have to get through. But really his message, his encouragement of that movie is that of that book is that everyone else's inability to be as good as you are at what you do is ultimately what's going to set you apart. So rather than getting depressed that there's 50,000 scripts being registered a year, just as you were saying, it's that thought of, well, if I'm the one in 10,000 who actually can deliver, I'm gonna get some very unique rewards. And yeah, I think for anyone who kind of struggles with those thoughts, this little book, The Dip, is just something that they should fray a path very quickly to go by. Well, Richard, as someone who's been around for a while and who clearly was able to predict this evolution um, within the industry that led to you having just such a huge success with Sage 32, what do you feel is just the most important thing for our listeners to understand right now about the oncoming evolution of the film industry?
Well, again, I think because there is, I'll go back to the content situation, because so many people are. It's because there's so much content. We're at the pinnacle, the peak right now of the amount of content that's being consumed and purchased and everything like that. I do believe that now is the time, if you're thinking about it, and you should be, about taking matters into your own hands as far as your content is concerned. I
Mm.
see actors these days, who I've acted friends who have had a very difficult time, landing consistent gigs, who have gone out and either hired somebody or worked with somebody to film them, had something written for them and then had it filmed.
Yes.
I've seen
Yeah.
writers, going out and filming their own material. I've seen filmmakers who want to make $20 million movie, a movie, that they think will take 20 million to make a $10,000 short
Mm.
as
Yeah.
proof of concept. Proof of concept these days is a very, very big thing. Again, I
Mm.
mentioned earlier we work with 500 executives in the business. I speak to a ton of them. We just did a bunch of panels up at Sundance 2 weeks ago, and we were having this conversation on every single one of these panels that just came back to this, is that
Mm.
these managers and agents and directors of development and producers are looking at proof of concept videos as
Yes.
something bigger, proof of concept projects, I should say, as something bigger,
Yes. I mean,
or at the gate.
there's no excuse these days not to. I mean, there's
No,
literally
there
no
isn't.
excuse not to.
There isn't. And I mean, the barrier of entry has never been lower. Of course, when the barrier goes down, more people hop over the barrier. So there's more
Yeah.
people, running for the brass ring. But at the same time, if you have confidence in who you are and in your craft and in your talents, and you surround yourself with the right people, there is no reason that you cannot go out there and put your talents on display. There are more avenues to release this content than ever before online. And yes, again, there is more noise, but again, that comes back to your networking. It comes back to creating your own brand. It comes back to finding
Yes.
champions of your work. All these things combined, again, give you that competitive advantage. So I think if there's one takeaway, is that there's no excuses anymore not to go
Yeah.
out there, as you said, to go make your own, to go create your own content and control your own destiny as much as humanly possible.
Mm. It's so interesting. I had a meeting a couple weeks back with someone who all of a sudden it was like this, it was a pretty negative meeting. And I was thinking, wow, why is this making me feel like it's the 90s again? And I suddenly realized it's because it's so rare these days to have a meeting where you feel like there's a gatekeeper that's hindering your progress.
Mm-hmm.
And it was that weird thing where it was like, wow, it's been such a long time since the last time I kind of encountered that dynamic where it's like there's one person to go through for this, and if they don't say yes, then you kind of screwed in that respect. It's like, wow, I remember those days back in the 90s where if you wanted to go do a TV show, you had to write up a proposal and send it to, at least in the UK, you would send it to a commissioner, and you may or may not hear back from by snail mail, and it was so restrictive. And now it's like, hey, if you want to do a TV show, grab some friends, grab a camera, and you can get something up online pretty quickly. um, well, Richard, we're about to enter our final act in which we're going to be getting some of your top recommendations. But before we do so, let's take a brief moment to thank our sponsors. When you're putting together that masterpiece movie, the coloring is a major creative decision. It can make the difference between whether the audience interprets your story as warm, cold, dark, or light, and it can help define the genre of the film. Here's a quick tip. Horror movies tend to have blue tones, romantic comedies tend to have warm tones, apocalyptic movies tend to be grey and washed out, movies in which reality is off kilter tend to have green tones, and action movies tend to feature a lot of teal and orange, particularly in their artwork. The Emmy Award winning Da Vinci Resolve from Blackmagic will help you get that perfect color for your next production. The Da Vinci Resolve 12 combines professional non-linear video editing with the world's most advanced color corrector, so you can now edit, color correct, finish, and deliver all from one system. The DaVinci Resolve is completely scalable and resolution independent, so it can be used on set, in a small studio, or integrated into the largest Hollywood production pipeline. From creative editing and multi-camera television production to high-end finishing and color correction, only DaVinci Resolve features the creative tools, compatibility, speed, and legendary image quality that you need to manage your entire workflow, which is why it is the #1 solution used on Hollywood feature films. Richard, welcome to the final act where you'll be showing incredible resources and mind blowing answers. Are you ready?
I am ready.
Richard, what's the best advice you've ever received?
It's simple. It was one word, and I got it both on the professional side. I got it from two different people on the professional side and once during my acting days, and it
Mm-hmm.
was just breathe. That was the word,
Yes.
breathe. And it sounds so simple, but it's all about perspective. And if you
Mm.
you know if you take a moment just to take a breath, to take a step back, it's amazing how much perspective you gain. Don't make decisions in the eye of the storm.
Yeah.
Step outside of it, and you'll be happier with your choices more often than not.
Yes, absolutely. Are you someone who kind of does mindfulness exercises, or who has a specific practice to help you refocus and tune out the stress and the noise? Or is that just something that you find you do instinctively?
It didn't come instinctively, and I've done meditation, and it's something that I get, bounced off of every once in a while, and I try to go back to it. But I exercise a lot. I try to get my mind clear. There's certain
Mm,
procedures that I have and certain ways that I approach things. But the biggest thing to me is that it's just that it's been training myself not to be a reactionary and training myself to
yes.
say, okay, wait a second, take a breath, take a step, just relax. And the other part of it too is that the emotions of the moment are not going to be the emotions of tomorrow morning. So
Yes. Yes.
that
Yes.
there's
Yes.
there's something in that when and I'm not saying it happened overnight. It took me a while to kind of train myself
Mm,
to get there, but there's something about that where once I got there, I was able to say, okay, you know
this too
what?
shall
That was some
pass.
really crappy news, and I'm really not happy
Yeah.
about that. Whatever. But I'm gonna go get some dinner. I'm gonna go
Yes.
out with some friends or whatever. I'm gonna go get it tomorrow.
You know,
And
I really feel that that's one of the most essential skills that someone needs to learn if they want to survive in this industry, particularly if they're going to be on set. Because let's face it, there were some horrible days on set. Even on the most organized of productions, there are just going to be those days where everything goes wrong, where you're exhausted, you haven't slept enough, and I think for me at least, it was one of the really early on in my career, it was one of the most important lessons I had to learn is, you know what, you might be, I mean, I know that guys probably don't do this, but as a woman, you might come back from set and just be like sobbing your eyes out and like, I just
mm,
do not want to go back to work tomorrow, but just have Like if you drink, have a nice glass of wine, have a meal,
Hmm.
do something to unwind that's just like self-care. And it's amazing how when you wake up the next morning, it's like, oh, it's just like a storm that passed.
Yeah, you got to allow yourself that. You said it. You got to allow yourself to relax for a second, then you got to allow yourself that good night of sleep to start.
Yeah. Well, Richard, I would love to know something that I ask of all of my guests, which is if you had just a single movie to stake your entire career on, what kind of movie would it be and what talent would you want attached?
Oh, that is an interesting question. Um,
I'm waiting for the day when someone comes to me and it's like, that movie idea I shared, a financier came to me, and the actor I mentioned, he was listening and he was like, I want to do it. And now we have this movie. That's my goal, is that like at some point in the next few years I get to hear that story.
that's funny. You know what? I think it would be an independent. First of all, I'm an independent film lover. I'm not a big studio
Yeah,
guy, and
I'm
whenever,
same.
yeah, yeah, no.
Though you know
I
what,
mean, and that's
those studio paychecks are pretty nice.
yeah. Hey, listen, I'm not frowning upon that, but I mean, and listen, the studios are actually having their little sea change and their little turning of the
Yeah,
tanker as well.
right.
Very slow, slow as it is, but. As an entrepreneur too, I just think that everything you put together, you always kind of associate a company like this as an independent film. Like, you're putting the pieces together, you're trying to find, the people that are on the rise and the people that you want it, that, believe so passionately in the project and aren't just collecting a paycheck like some
Yeah.
of the studio people do. Um, so I would probably want it to be like an independent film, and I would want it to be, my talent. I would want those people on the rise. I would want the Brie Larsons,
I was gonna say, like, she just came to my mind so strongly. I was so sure you were gonna say Brie Larson.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I'd want. And it's funny because that goes all the way back. I actually had a conversation about this like a couple of years ago, and we were kind of talking about it in this kind of associative kind of way. And
Yeah.
she had just come off Short Term 12, which I thought was amazing. I thought she was amazing in it, and she was the name that kind of came up back then. So I'm going to stick with her, even though she's going to win the Oscar and she's going to go on to do studio movies. So.
Yes, absolutely. I feel like she's one of those people who's always going to be doing cool independence, though. She's kind of like that Naomi Watts type actress where I think it's really the role that she's more
Yeah.
looking at than. But yeah, it's so crazy to me with Brie Larson that everyone's kind of saying, "Oh, she's this huge overnight success," and it's like, yeah,
Oh
it's an
God, no.
overnight success that only took about 2 decades to make happen.
That's
um,
right.
so it's just incredible when one looks at her resume to just realize the years and years and years of work that went into her having that tipping point moment. It's a sobering lesson for all of us, I think. Well, Richard, you strike me as a very educated gentleman.
Oh, thank
And
you.
obviously, you've been a publisher and a writer. So I'm fairly sure you're probably someone who reads quite a bit. And I would just love to know if you could recommend a single book for our listeners, maybe something that's been really instrumental to your film career. What would it be and why?
One of the books I love, and I don't care what kind of creative you are, and this even goes if you're a business person, is The War of Art
The
by
War
Stephen
of
Pressfield.
Art. I've
The
never heard
War
of
of
that
Art.
one. What's it
It,
about?
it's a fantastic book, and it's really all about procrastination. It's all about the reasons we give ourselves not to go out and create art. And
Yes.
and it fits for entrepreneurs as well as anybody working in the creative field of film on any level. It even works for people working on the business end of film because it's similar. It's universal in why we procrastinate and
Hmm.
why we don't commit. It's a fantastic book. It's not dense at all. It breaks it down into very, very simple terms. You will be reading it and nodding your head. Your neck will hurt because you'll sit there and go, "Holy shit, that's
Yeah,
me."
it's gonna be
That
painful.
yeah, you're like, "Oh my!" You're gonna think that the guy's name who wrote it, his name is Stephen Press, so you're gonna think that he wrote it for you, and that he
Yes.
was sitting there with you,
He was
and
spying on me. Um,
uh,
this
it's a
is,
great
well,
book.
seriously, this is something I was literally writing to a friend about this just yesterday morning because it kind of saying, actually, it was to a producer. just kind of explaining to him some of the work that I've chosen to do in the past, where admittedly anyone would look at that work and go, wow, these guys were kind of lacking on the budget, maybe in the costume department or what have you. But I was kind of defending my work by saying to them, listen, going back to that proof of concept thing, I would always rather be doing something and proving that I can not just get something made, but get it finished, and that
Mm.
it's found its audience, it has generated some money, it's generated some press. And yes, by no means is it ideally what I would have done if I'd had a budget that was 10 times the size, but I would rather be that guy who is always, maybe needing to give some caveats on their work, because let's face it, if you have a tenth of the budget that you actually need, there's going to be some compromises. I'd rather be that guy than the guy who's saying, well, one day when I make something, it's going to be perfect. And I've had these friends, I still have these friends within the industry where it's like, they are ironically in such a good place in terms of cash flow that if they wanted to go and make an indie movie for like with 100 grand of their own money, they could do. And I'm
Mm.
thinking, I think there's some ways to make a pretty decent feature for 100 grand if you're disciplined, if you're creative. And yet in their mind, it's, well, until someone gives me 50 or 20 million dollars or more, I don't want to do that, because I just, my art is too precious. I'm too precious, what have you. And it drives me nuts, because I'm like,
Mm.
dude, you have so many contacts. You have the money to do this. Like, just get something done on a smaller budget. And if you do an amazing job of that, you know what? That $15 million movie will end up happening one day. But no one's just gonna hand that to you the first time round. And I just feel like this is a book maybe I need to buy for some people and ship to them secretly.
Oh, I think you should. I mean,
Yeah.
you see that all the time in this business, and that's that idea about being precious about your art and being so precious about every little thing. It's really in this business. There's a few things that you really have to learn. One is
Mm.
you have to learn you have to learn it's a business and know. So you have to learn you have thick skin. You have to
Yeah.
learn that you're always going to get notes, and you're always going to have some
Yes.
criticism, and you're going to have to
Hmm.
learn where to pick your battles. And then you really think is the other thing is the thing you just hit upon, which is the second you start to become too precious about your material is the second that everybody else goes looking elsewhere.
Yeah,
You know
I
what I
mean,
mean?
I just think it's pride. Like, I get someone not wanting to work on a lower budget. I don't want to work on a lower budget. I don't really know of that many people who would say, "Oh, I'd rather make a movie for a 500,000 rather than 5 million or 50 million." But the reality is, we all have to start somewhere. And if you don't start with what you have in front of you, like you were saying earlier, maybe you're the actor who just, you need to shoot a web series on your iPhone.
Hmm.
I just really believe that if you have the talent, there are people who have the eyes to make abstraction of the fact that the lighting isn't perfect, the makeup isn't perfect, to see that at least at a very minimum, you're that person who comes with batteries already in. You're that person who's going to just go and make something happen. And yeah, I feel that that's a really important point. So yeah, who knows, maybe I'm going to be placing a bulk order for that
Yeah.
book, just handing
I
it
actually
out.
I've known people that have done that. I actually know people
Really,
that give
no,
this book as
it's,
a gift to
yeah.
almost everybody. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's like a polite way of telling people to get off their ass.
That's right.
um,
That's right.
well, Film Talk Nation, I know that you love audio. To thank you for joining us today, we partnered with our friends over at Audible to offer you a free audiobook. Great titles available include Story by Robert McKee, Save the Cat Strikes Back by Blake Snyder, Why Not Me by Mindy Kaling, and Your Year of Yes by Shonda Rhimes. If you haven't already done so, you can claim your free audiobook at audibletrial.com/film talk. That's audibletrial.com/film talk. And this link will also be included in today's show notes. Richard, if you could recommend a single movie to our listeners, what would it be and why?
Oh man. Um,
It's the
I
toughest thing
probably
in the world, right? Just one movie. It's like
it's
being at,
tough for one movie.
yeah.
I'll take it a slightly different direction and say that I would recommend a few documentaries, and
Oh,
I'd say
good.
that
Yes.
documentaries about filmmaking in general, because not only because of the
Yes.
process and
Please
everything, but
do.
just like what we were just talking about, the procrastination and the challenges and the fact that it doesn't go easy for everybody. So I would recommend like Hearts of Darkness, of course, which is Coppola's journey to make Apocalypse Now.
Oh gosh, I
Um,
have not seen
wh-
that yet, but I would imagine that's some pretty grim viewing.
oh, you have to see it though. I mean, because again, it just shows you that not everything goes easy and not everything goes
Oh,
swimmingly,
no,
and
I
what to fight
mean,
for and what not to fight
the
for.
story of what he
Lost.
went through on that production is
Oh, it's
epic. I'm
incredible.
like, it's like I read a while back James Cameron's, I think it was kind of like his biography of kind of the phase where he was doing Titanic. And I just read that book and I was like, you know what? If it was anyone else than James Cameron, he would have been like taken by mobsters off set because there's just no way. He's like full on just telling the studio, I don't even care what you think, I'm going over budget by X tens of millions of dollars. And it's like, oh my gosh, like the balls that one has to have to get away with that. I think you have to be like one of these characters, like a Francis Ford Coppola or James Cameron, who's like, I am the captain of the ship, and I'm the visionary, and you are not taking me off this project. So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And then I could recommend another Lost in La Mancha, which takes you the other way, kind of in a way. With Terry
Oh my God.
Gilliam.
Yeah, I actually worked on the company that for the company that put that out, or one of the companies that put that out. So it's a title that's really near and dear to my heart.
Yeah, I mean
Yeah.
that's another perspective on it, and then then you got other ones that are a little bit more
Yeah.
comical, like American Movie and things like that. But I mean, I
Yeah.
think that the filmmaking documentaries give you a perspective on,
Yes.
especially if you're just starting out in this business, a perspective on that it's not easy for anybody. It's
No.
not easy for
No.
anybody. Coppola, Gilliam, it doesn't matter.
No.
It doesn't matter who you are. There's always challenges.
Well, do you want to briefly share with our audience that story of what Lost in La Mancha is about, or would you rather that I do?
Well, you put it out.
Well, no, not me personally. I just happen to be on the
Well, you were
sidelines.
involved
But
with it. You should have the honors.
yeah, well, thank you. It basically originated as this BTS of this movie that I believe Gilliam had actually tried to get up and running once before and it had kind of failed. And this was him going back again, getting back on the horse, no pun intended, to tell the story of Don Quixote's kind of adventures. And what was supposed to just be the BTS ends up being kind of the movie that comes out, because what it documents is how in, I think it was 6 or 7 days, every imaginable disaster that could possibly happen to a production happens, from, like crazy floods and storms to their lead actor realizing that he has testicular cancer when he is going to be spending the entire production on a horse, to realizing that there's like military flybys going overhead and the entire thing has to shoot outdoors. It is just like, for anyone who's ever felt like they've had a bad day on set, this is, I think, a combination of being deeply cathartic and at the same time slightly painful. And it is just riveting. And of course, you get to see I think there was, isn't it Johnny Depp who's in the
Hmm.
production? So it's an absolute gem. And it's a movie I have recommended to so many filmmakers who've been at the end of their ropes. I've been like, if you think it's bad for you need to check out this movie, because it is going to make you feel a whole lot better about what you're going through. So yeah, and who knows, maybe that Don Quixote movie is going to come out one day. I would not put it past Terry Gilliam to be like, I'm going to make it
He's
happen.
he's working on it again.
Is
There was just an
he?
article yesterday. Yep, yep,
No way. Oh my gosh,
yep.
he's
He's
such a
back at it
hero.
again.
He's such a hero. Like, you kind of think after Baron Munchausen, like most people would have been out of the industry, but he's just, I don't know, it's just like the more he gets pushed back, I think the more he wants it. So,
Oh yeah, he's not
yeah.
gonna let it go.
No. So I feel a bit weird even asking you this next question, as you have this, you're the founder of one of the preeminent filmmaking websites online, but other than obviously Stage 32, which there will be a link for in the show notes, and everyone who's listening to the show needs to go to the show notes. They need to click on that link and they need to get themselves registered, because honestly, to find a platform like that you can connect with for free, it's a no-brainer. But other than Stage 32, are there any other like websites or apps that you personally have found to be really helpful in your filmmaking career?
Yeah, it's a combination of filmmaking and it's just a combination of time saving in a lot
Mm.
of ways. I'm a big, I love to read all the trades, and I also, obviously commit
With
some of
what
the.
time? With what time?
But listen, every morning is another part of my, again, it's a routine. It's something I do every
Yeah.
morning. My cup of coffee, and I read the trades. I have to be up on what's going on in the business. I enjoy
Yeah.
reading it, so I
Yeah.
enjoy, reading the trades and seeing what's going on. To me, again, it's part of my job
Yeah.
to know what's happening in the business. So I make a point of it every single morning. That's my morning routine. Is my coffee and the trades.
I'm hearing a bit of
Get,
a New York. Is that a bit of a New York
oh
pronunciation of
yeah, no yeah.
coffee?
I'm from New
Like,
York. Oh yeah,
I can't even, I'm
originally.
not even going to try and say it, imitate the way you say coffee.
Yeah,
But yeah, it
that's
sounded a little New.
coffee.
Yes, that's it.
Yeah, yeah. But I also, I read a lot of other stuff too. I'm obviously big into the technology and from by virtue of the business
Yes.
that I'm in, and entrepreneurship, CEO stuff, all that stuff. So I use a couple of apps. I use Feedly, I use Circa, I use Pulse. I use them on and off there. The
Mm.
aggregators,
Yes.
I'm able to curate my own content. My
Mm.
whole thing is you just said with what time, and that is very, very true. There is only so much time in the day, and if there's one thing I hate doing, it's wasting time.
Yeah.
So anything that allows me to be able to curate and aggregate my content into one spot where I'm able to, get it on the go, read it quickly. If I'm standing in line at, Coffee Bean or Starbucks or something, and I have some time, whatever the case is, that I can grab it really, really quick and on the go. So those are, some of the apps I like.
I think that's a really good life hack, so to speak, for filmmakers, because the reality is, particularly for actors, there's so much waiting around. I mean, if they tell you your audition is at 4, it's going to be at 4:45. I mean, it's like so much waiting and so much commuting, and I think finding where you can use those dead patches of time, if you're spending 2
Mhm.
hours a day commuting, get into listening to podcasts. I mean, that was kind of the idea behind this show, is how can we as filmmakers be using these periods of time when we're sat around waiting, when we might have 5 minutes here or 20 minutes there, and really use those to hone our art. So I think that that's a great suggestion, and we'll definitely be including all of those links in the show notes. Well, Richard, it's time for the martini shot. What parting piece of guidance would you like to share with us?
The martini shot, I love it. Uh, um, well, you know what? I think the parting piece of guidance is just not to make excuses. I think it's very, very
Mm,
easy to fall into the trap of woe is me. I don't have time.
yeah.
You know,
I
you
don't
don't
have an
realize how
agent.
yeah, you don't realize how busy I am. You don't realize, well, look, everybody has the same 24 hours in the day.
Mm,
Everybody gets the same reset every morning. The question is, what do you do at that time versus what the other people, what somebody
yeah.
else does with that time? And I tell you, that could be the difference between landing a job and not landing a job.
Yes.
It could be between making that connection that changes your life and not making it. You
Mm,
don't know, but if you're not doing it, I can tell you that it's not going to happen.
yeah.
So don't make excuses.
Yeah, that is a great piece of advice, especially coming from someone of the stature of yourself, and I think that all the more speaks to why people need to be connecting with Stage 32. Is it's going to be a tool. If you have, if your hang up is, I haven't had work experience yet, or I don't have an agent, or I don't have a writing partner, whatever your excuse is, you're gonna find a solution if you connect with people via Stage 32. So I just really want to encourage all of our audience to to find some time today to go and get themselves registered for that if they aren't already. Well, that's a wrap. Film Talk Nation. In this industry, you're only as good as the people you know, and today you've been hanging out with Richard Botto and myself. If you want to go the extra mile, head over to filmtalkpodcast.com and type Richard Botto into the search bar. The show notes from today's show will appear along with everything we discussed, like Richard's recommended book and movie. Richard, we appreciate you sharing your priceless insight with us today. Film Talk Nation thanks you, and we'll see you on the red carpet.